He had everything: power, money, control. But somewhere along the way, he lost himself. That morning, the boardroom felt like a battlefield, and he was the general everyone feared. She stood at the end of the table, hands trembling, eyes steady, one mistake in a report, and his pride needed someone to blame. "You're fired." 2 words, sharp as a blade, thrown not at her work, but at her heart. No one dared to speak, but as she walked out, the air changed. Something sacred left that room with her. Hours passed, night fell, and for the first time, he couldn't breathe inside his own empire. He went back to the office just to grab his phone, at least that's what he told himself. But destiny had other plans. At the end of the hallway, behind the glass door of the old chapel, he saw her, kneeling, head bowed. She wasn't crying. She was praying. For him. Her lips moved silently, asking the universe to forgive the man who had just humiliated her. Something broke inside him. Not pride, not anger, but the illusion of control. For the first time in years, he felt small, and in that smallness, he felt something sacred. He realized that the woman he'd fired was the only soul who had truly seen him. That night, he didn't send an apology. He didn't call. He just stayed there, watching her pray for his redemption. And as the rain washed the city below, a tear finally left his eyes. Because sometimes, you have to lose the world you built to remember the soul you forgot. He had everything, until love destroyed his empire and rebuilt his heart. The next morning came, but it didn't feel like morning. The light entered his penthouse like an intruder, cold and unwanted. He sat at the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, his mind replaying the sound of her voice, the way she said, "Yes, Mr. Cole," even when his tone was cruel. He tried to work, to drown the noise, but the silence inside the room grew louder than the city below. Every email, every report, every number on the screen. None of it meant anything anymore. For years he believed power could erase pain, but now, pain was all that remained. He poured himself a drink, the same whiskey he used to celebrate deals worth millions. But this time, it burned differently, as if his body knew it was no longer victory, but punishment. He thought about the chapel, about her voice whispering to the universe, about the way she didn't curse him, didn't hate him, she just prayed for him. No one had ever done that, not even when he had everything. The world outside his glass walls kept moving, but inside, time had stopped. He opened the file she left on the table before leaving. Her handwriting marked the corner of a page, a note he had never noticed. It said only one thing: "Forgive yourself, and you'll see." He didn't understand it at first. He thought forgiveness was something you earned from others, not something you gave to your own soul. But the more he read it, the heavier it felt, and then the heavier he became. He didn't leave the apartment for days. He stopped answering calls. His team said investors were pulling out, contracts were breaking, headlines were starting to change from visionary CEO to fallen empire. And for the first time in his life, he didn't care. He walked through the empty hallways of his company one night, long after everyone had gone home. The lights flickered, the echoes of his own footsteps followed him like ghosts. He stopped at her desk, the same one she used to sit at every morning, coffee beside her, smile ready even before he looked up. The chair was empty now, but her energy still lived there, gentle, patient, unshaken. He ran his hand across the surface of the desk and found a photo tucked under the keyboard, a picture of the whole team from last Christmas. She was in the back, half hidden, smiling like someone who believed the world could still be kind. Something inside him cracked again, a soundless break, the kind you don't hear but feel in your bones. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since he was a child, he whispered, "I'm sorry." The word left his lips like a confession, and with it came a storm, not outside, but inside his chest. He thought about calling her, but fear held him back. What could he say? How do you apologize to someone who prayed for you when you didn't deserve it? So instead, he did the only thing his soul knew to do. He went back to that same chapel. It was empty this time. No candles, no music, only silence. He knelt in the same place she had knelt. The marble was cold beneath his hands, and for a long time, he didn't speak. He just breathed and let the quiet undo him. Then he whispered again, not to her, not to God, but to the part of him that had been asleep for too long. I want to change. Tears came again, uninvited, unstoppable. He stayed there until the morning light broke through the stained glass, turning everything gold. And in that golden light, he understood her note. Forgiveness wasn't something you asked for. It was something you became. When he walked out of the chapel, the city looked the same, but nothing inside him was. He knew it wasn't the end of the story, only the beginning of the man he was meant to be. He didn't plan to see her again that day. But the city has a way of bending time when a soul is ready. He left the chapel at dawn, eyes still swollen, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, steps lighter than they'd been in years. He walked without aim, as if the pavement itself were a prayer, and the street answered. He stopped at the small cafe 2 blocks from the old office, a place he had never noticed because men who live for numbers rarely notice places that heal. The bell above the door rang, soft, forgiving, and there she was, behind the counter, not as an employee, not as an assistant, but as a woman who had chosen a quiet morning over a loud world. Clara looked up surprised, not afraid, not angry, simply present. Her eyes met his, and he felt the same light that had broken him open in the chapel, a light that didn't accuse, a light that invited. "Good morning," she said, voice steady, as if greeting a stranger whose name she remembered from a dream. He swallowed, tried to speak, but the words stumbled like a child learning to walk. "I came to say, I'm sorry," he managed, and the cafe seemed to grow still, as if the cups, the sugar, the sunlight through the window had been waiting for those words. She nodded, not with triumph, not with bitterness, but with the calm of someone who knew that apologies are not endings, they are doorways. "Coffee?" she asked, and he nodded like a man accepting a sacrament. They sat by the window, rain soft on the glass, and for a while, they said nothing. He held the warm cup with both hands as if warmth were new, as if warmth were rare. "I was cruel," he said at last, the words heavy but clean. "I treated you like a tool, a shield, a mirror for my pride. You didn't deserve that." Her gaze didn't waver. "You were hurting," she answered, not as an excuse, not as a defense, but as a diagnosis. He exhaled, a breath that felt like air after a lifetime underwater. "I thought winning would save me," he said, "but it only made me louder than my own heart." She watched the rain trace silver lines on the window. "Sometimes," she whispered, "you have to lose the noise to hear the truth." He reached into his pocket, pulled out the folded paper he had carried since the night he found it, the note in her handwriting, the one that said, "Forgive yourself, and you'll see." He placed it between them like a fragile bridge. "I didn't understand," he said, "until the light came through the chapel window, and I felt small, and finally safe." Her eyes softened, then deepened the way water darkens under moonlight. "Forgiveness is not forgetting," she said. "It's remembering who you are under the armor." He looked away, the old habit of a king who feared his reflection. "I want to do better," he said, "but I don't want to ask you for anything. Not trust, not time, not your kindness. I only wanted to look you in the eyes and tell you I was wrong." A long pause settled between them, not cold, not warm, just true. Then she spoke, and her voice carried the gentle weight of a bell. "If you mean that, then prove it, not to me, to your life." He felt the words land inside him like seeds. "How?" he asked, not defensive, not proud, only hungry. "Start where you ended," she said. You built a tower out of fear and called it success. Lay down one brick at a time. Make peace with the people you used to use. Listen first. Decide later. And when the storm inside you returns, because it will, kneel again. He nodded slowly, as if learning a prayer in a new language. I can do that, he said, and for the first time he believed it. But destiny, always listening, added its own test. The door of the cafe opened. The bell rang again, and two men in expensive coats walked in, voices sharp, smiles polished, eyes hungry. Former partners, former friends, future wolves. Ethan, one of them said, we've been looking for you. You've caused quite a mess and in quite a panic. Sign here, make a statement, throw someone under the bus, and the market will love you again. They placed a folder on the table, ink ready, trap set. He didn't touch it. He looked at Clara instead, not for permission, but for orientation. The kind a sailor seeks from the stars. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence was a compass. He opened the folder, read the lies sewn into the lines, and felt the old empire rise inside him like a tide. The tide that drowns. The tide that kills. He closed the folder, calm now, and handed it back. No, he said, simple, clean, without theater. I'm not buying my image with someone else's blood. The men scoffed, performed their outrage, warned him about consequences, promised a storm that would bury him. Do what you need to do, he answered, and the room seemed to widen, as if the walls had been waiting for that sentence to unclench. They left with the bell jangling behind them, and the cafe exhaled. He turned to Clara, and for the first time she smiled. Not the smile of an assistant, not the smile of a saint, but the smile of a witness to a man choosing the narrow road. That was your first step, she said. He felt something like sunlight touch the part of him that had lived in winter. It felt like losing, he admitted, and like breathing at the same time. She finished her coffee, then stood, graceful as a prayer. I can't decide your future, she said, but I can tell you this. Souls recognize change, even when the world doesn't. He stood too, not to block her way, not to hold her, simply to honor the moment. Will I see you again? He asked, not a demand, not a plea, a hope. She tilted her head, that soft light in her eyes again. If the path is true, it leads to the same door, she said. Make the path true. He watched her leave, the bells singing her name without knowing it. And when the door closed, he didn't feel abandoned. He felt assigned. He walked out into the rain, not to run from the storm, but to meet it. He called the people he had avoided, admitted what he had denied, repaired what he had broken where repair was possible and where it wasn't. He laid flowers inside his silence. He returned to the office and gathered the team that still believed in work that didn't devour the worker. He listened, really listened, to the voices he had once muted under the anthem of efficiency. A junior analyst told him the truth like a friend tells a friend, and he thanked her, publicly, and a new kind of power entered the room. At night, he walked the city without a destination, found small chapels in places he had never looked, learned the shape of humility by tracing it with his knees. He didn't ask for miracles. He asked for courage to become one. Days later, the headlines sharpened like knives, but the wounds they tried to inflict could not find the man they had been written for. He was beginning to become someone else, or perhaps finally becoming himself. Then, the city spoke again, in the language of chance. A charity gala, the kind he used to attend for photographs and prestige, now approached like a field where reparation could grow. He accepted the invitation under one condition: anonymous donation, no spotlight, only service. He arrived without a tie, a white shirt open at the throat, and hands ready to carry boxes instead of shaking them. And there, across the room, not dressed in diamonds, not dressed in status, Clara, arranging trays, talking softly to a volunteer, smiling like a sunrise no camera could capture. He didn't interrupt. He waited. He let the moment choose him. When she finally looked up and saw him, no surprise, no shock, just that steady recognition, that knowing that belongs to souls, not to schedules. "You came," she said. "I'm learning," he answered, and the way her face warmed told him the lesson had begun to write itself on his life. They worked side by side without many words, passing plates, greeting guests, watching names become faces, watching faces become stories. At the end, when the room had emptied and the lights had softened to a quiet gold, he turned to her, not with a question this time, but with an offering. "I can't change the past," he said, "but I can build a future that apologizes with actions, not phrases. If ever there is a way for me to serve your life, say it, and I will." She studied him, not suspicious, not naive, and then she gave him the first true test. "Come back tomorrow," she said, "not as a CEO, not as a man trying to impress. Come back as a pair of hands willing to carry weight no one sees." He nodded, grateful for the weight, grateful for the chance to become useful. "I'll be here," he said, and his voice didn't shake. She took a breath that sounded like a blessing, then added, soft but unarguable, "And don't bring cameras, don't bring promises, bring your truth." He smiled then, small, new, the kind of smile that belongs to beginnings. "My truth," he said, "is learning to love what I can lift, not what I can own." Outside, the rain eased to a hush. The streets shone like a path freshly washed, and somewhere inside him, a door swung open, not to the old empire, but to a kingdom without walls. Tomorrow would come, and with it, the second step. Not glory, not applause, but the simple holiness of showing up, again and again, until the heart remembers how to stay. Years later, the world had already moved on. But somewhere by the river, a man and a woman built a life without applause. He still wore the same watch, a symbol of time once wasted. Only now, it no longer ticked for deadlines. It ticked for presence. Clara asked, "What are you thinking about?" He turned to her and said, "That the empire finally became what it was meant to be." "And what's that?" He looked at her, eyes soft as dawn. "A place where souls remember why they came here, to love. I had everything once, but until I learned to give, I had nothing. Now I have little, and it's everything. Because some empires are built in glass and steel, and others, in hearts that finally learned to kneel." If this story touched your heart, follow Soul Billionaires for more journeys like this, where love rewrites destiny, and the soul becomes the greatest fortune of all. You are more than what you own. You are what you give. Follow Soul Billionaires and where love rewrites destiny, and the soul becomes the greatest fortune of all.